Hello, my name is Fraser Simons. This is my channel, Springboard Thought. Today I'm going to do a review of a long-listed book for the Booker Prize 2022. I consumed it on audio. This is O William by Elizabeth Strout, third in the Amgash trilogy, which I consumed on audio. All of them I actually consumed on audio, all of which also have the same narrator, Kimberly Farr, who is excellent. I can see why this was longlisted. This is somewhat standalone. I think it was probably enriched quite a bit by my reading the previous two novels, though. But you could get away with it, and also I think that you would have an interesting experience consuming them in a different order than I did, namely 1, 2, 3. I think you could read this book, and if you're very interested in the things that it more or less alludes to but doesn't go into because it probably assumes that you've consumed other content, it would be an interesting experience to go back even in reverse order, since the second book is a bunch of short stories of people connected to Lucy Barton, which is the main protagonist of the first book. In the small town, it sort of orients around her a sort of constellation of people that you hear about in the first novel somewhat, and people you haven't, that orient around the family in some way or another. And it expounds on things mentioned in the first book, but again, it feels sort of standalone. And then the first book, if you've consumed it, really a lot of the things mentioned in the next two books, including O William, will feel drawn from in a very, like, maybe not cyclical way, but it feels like Lucy Barton's voice has been developing to this point, which is exactly what's been happening in the fiction. Lucy Barton is about predominantly the relationship with her family, her mother in particular, and the intersections of poverty, and essentially how each of her siblings, including herself, were put on a trajectory because of those things at a very early age, and then going through the things that they did, how much agency they actually have in their lives, how much how much trauma, pain, actual choices in life did they actually have because of their circumstances. This book, O William, is at a point in her life about, I think, 20 years later or so. It's very slippery with time in this book, where she's older and looking back at her husband, who you also get to know in the first book, not in the second book though. And she's looking at it at a point in which I call it eulogy fiction, basically, where the person has passed, and it's kind of an open letter to them, even though they know very well that they won't be able to ever consume the words, but it's meant as a sort of cathartic exorcism of this person onto the page in order to get something out. Some working that has been knotted in them is being unknotted with this. And Lucy Barton is a very, like, stream of consciousness, kind of very endearing, imbued with a lot of personality and quirkiness in the voice and style of the writing. And I think it would kind of annoy me if I was consuming it on the page, which is why Kimberly Farr's voice and her performance is so excellent for this story. Because Kimberly Farr sounds like she's about the same age as Lucy Barton is in the third book. And so I had the sense that she was literally growing into that role that she sounds like she's in if you're listening to the narration. She's older, she's a little bit more wise, she knows herself, and she is, I think, articulating a lot of the themes that have been drawn in the first two books in a way that is much more mature. It feels more earned. The first book feels a little bit emotionally manipulative, maybe. And it does a very good job in the second book of creating characters that you're very empathetic towards, even if they're not very likable. And it's always around intersections of poverty, of trauma, of pain, and giving these people dignity and sometimes some hope that they didn't quite have before, or just giving you a different lens in which to look at somebody, sort of Frederick Bachman style, except this is less prescriptive, I would say, than those books. This is more of a subjective experience where it's not just laid out for you in dialogue what you should be thinking, which I enjoy very much. And it's because of that a lot more touching. This is definitely the refined product of those three books. You know, she's very like tangential in her thinking. She will start off like in a car trip that she took with William. She'll be all over the place, go back to a memory in the past when with their kids. She'll be trying to essentially, like I said, just sort of exorcise William from her, but not in a malicious way. She's sort of trying to make other people understand why she cares about William, despite him doing some pretty crappy things, both of them not functioning that well in their marriage. It traces both of them, instead of a single entity like in the first book, to their roots in surprising ways. And again, with like a character that you will be familiar with if you've read the first book, I believe, possibly the second, that kind of draws them together in a really surprising and satisfactory way. Also, these books are kind of eminently consumable, I would say. Like on audio, I listened to it at 2.75 times, which is very fast, even for me. And the cadence of the voice matches that sped up style. Like she's a little bit of a slow talker maybe. And so whether you're drawn into storytelling where it's like a methodically drawn out sentence, or you want something that's a lot quicker, Kimberly Farr's voice is very conducive to both things. I've tried both. And so if you want to consume it like a movie where it's literally 2 hours to consume the whole novel, because the longest book is the second at 8 hours, and you consume it at 2.75, 2.9 times, that's like the length of a movie. You can just bang out all three of these novels and get the full context. But even just alone, I think that the things that I think are fairly profound in which Strout is sketching out are going to hit the reader no matter what. There is some sickly sweet moments, but not so much as the first two novels at all, if that's what you're worried about. Again, it's, I think, aware of not earning certain moments in the past and kind of going back to enrich those moments at the same time as draw a conclusion to them here, presumably if this is the last book anyway. I'm more concerned about Lucy's thought processes than sketching out like a very tight plot. It's not plot driven or character driven, I would say. Some people would probably define it as a character driven story solely because she's all over the place, and everything that she says has a purpose, and it is definitely characterizing her and the people that she's giving context to, yet their lives are mired by essentially plot beats, life events happening to them because of the things that happened to them in their past. So it's a unique story, and it definitely just it just worked for me. I really enjoyed it, and I could see why it made the list despite being the third in a series. And I think that's about all I have to say on it. I was surprisingly moved, very glad she moved away from the sort of like self-helpy, prescriptive, this is what you should think stuff, and seems to have grown into a maturity that Lucy Barton herself seems to embody in this book. I will do more reviews for the long list of books. I've read 8 so far. The rest are on their way in one way or another. And so I should be able to read all of the long list, but it really depends on the library, especially for night crawling. I'm like 9th in line and have been waiting 4 months already. So it's sort of, we'll see. Hopefully they ordered more copies because it got longlisted. Either way, I will complete this series out, even if it's after the shortlisted books come out. And I hope that you're enjoying what you're reading. If you have any thoughts, comments, feelings about this book or any of the novels, feel free to comment below. And otherwise, I will see you next video. Bye.